Since Joel Ashton's visit to our garden on the 9th of May, Joel has persuaded me to perhaps do short garden tours of our garden to encourage people to get into the wildlife. The gardens aren't always the tidiest, but they are sure full of interest. So now on the 29th of June, I'm going to do my quick garden tour. Since Joel's visit on the 9th of May, I haven't mowed my lawn, and I'm encouraging the wildflowers that are present in the soil to mature. Well, looking closely, you can see there's quite a bit of self-heal now developing. As well as the daisies, we've had quite a few ragged robin flowers. The red clover's present, so is the creeping buttercup and the small daisies. A little bit of knotweed is growing. I'm expecting some of the yellow flowers like dandelions, I can't remember the name of them, they'll be coming up before long. And I also see there's chickweed and white clover. Nothing what I didn't expect, but it does look wild, and it will harbour the frogs when they leave the pond at the beginning of next month. This is somewhere else where they can hide. The wild orchids that's colonised my garden over the years have now reached maturity. And these orchids, which are a hybrid between common spotted and southern marsh orchids, have now reached their peak. These are common spotted orchids, but it looks like they've a little bit of southern marsh orchid in them. I think it's a bit of a hybrid, very difficult to tell. Some of the leaves are plain and some of the leaves have got spots on them. Here we can see I've got an old alpine trough which had some alpines in it. It still has, but look what's grown in it now. I've got 3 or 4 southern marsh orchids, the absolute beauties, probably just going over the top now, but they're still lovely to see. And again, they are growing in a subsoil of just gravel and grit. Nothing much there, but it must be okay for them. And they're quite robust to say they're in a fairly dry environment. This is our pond nearest the house. It's overgrown with weeds, so in a few days' time I'll probably have to weed some of it out, leaving the weed on the side, making sure that as much of the aquatic life can crawl back in the pond. And you can see here we've got 2 common spotted orchids growing. The bog garden has really filled up now, and in amongst that lot there will be some common spotted orchids, but I think they're getting choked out by the bigger flowers, such as Hemp Agrame, the Loosestrife that grows. In a few days' time the knotweed will start to open, along with some of the meadowsweet. The meadowsweet tends to be a bit dominant around the pond, so I have to keep it under control. These are southern marsh orchids, and they've really taken hold. Last year they were much smaller, and you can see now they've just about peaked. And again, as we look over our top pond, it's fully mature now, things are growing. There've been some damselflies, but I haven't seen any dragonflies yet. Again, it's full of weeds, so I'm going to have to thin it out, being careful to leave the weed on the side so the aquatic plants will crawl back in. It's surprising where flowers will grow. This is just in the gravel what the garden shed sat on, and I can see we've got here fox and cubs, herb robert, and these larger daisies. They look naturally, they look a little bit untidy, but it's all part of the wildlife scene. We love it. Just saying that, and I've just seen, as on the side of the door, a large dragonfly, probably hatched from my pond today. Well, I haven't seen it around before, so it's probably going to lay its eggs in the pond to complete its life cycle. When I see the dragonflies flying around the pond, I take particular note where they're laying their eggs, because every year we see 1 or 2 of them dipping the back end into the pond, and then in 2 or 3 years' time we have another generation of dragonflies. They're so fascinating. It's a must, is a garden pond, to attract all this wonderful aquatic wildlife. Looking round the pond, it's really matured since Joe visited us on the 9th of May. And I can see as I look round the pond, there's another orchid growing there. It hasn't been planted, it's just arrived naturally. That's the beauty of a wildlife garden. You don't know what to expect. Not all my plants are wildflowers, it's a mixture of herbaceous border and wildflowers which have come in naturally. Some of the plants I plant are herbaceous plants, but always bearing in mind the attraction of bees and butterflies and nectar-rich plants. But there's a lot of them just wildflowers which have just naturalised, and you can see around the pond now the first of the meadowsweet is breaking into flower. Again, it will attract many insects. The pipe you see there is to collect rainwater from my garden shed roof to help to fill the pond up, so I'm not topping it up with tap water. I've just weeded back the plants at the side of the stream so we can see it again. But again, it's a natural tapestry that we enjoy. I'm not absolutely certain about these, but I'm told these are Melancholy Fissiles, and I planted them because it attracts a lot of bees. Because in the top of the garden I've got some solitary bees now, which are now nesting or building the next generation in the holes I drilled in the wood. Looking down from the top corner of the garden, you can see now it's a mixture, a tapestry of wildflowers and herbaceous flowers, all attracting their own particular type of insect. Even though there's not so many flying at present, in another few weeks it will be full of the warmer colours in the garden, the reds and the oranges, which again the butterflies seem to love when we come to the middle of July. This is another garden plant we like. Sometimes it regenerates from the previous season, but this year I've just bought a few from a garden centre. It's verbena, and it's beloved by our butterflies and bees. I'm glad to say that the blue tits that nested in our box in May have fledged. There was just one dead youngin, so I reckon there were about 7 or 8 fledged, so we've been successful with the blue tits nest this year. The red flowers you can see are Chilean Flame. It's like a climber. It grows, and it grows out of little roots in the soil, and every year it surprises me because it comes up all over the garden. It's a South American plant, I think from Chile, but it's naturalised in the garden, and then when the berries come in the back end, the birds love them. This is part of the garden I'm not as keen on because it's a quieter period now. The flowers of the white daisies haven't yet come out, and in amongst them there's purple Loosestrife growing. Again, they'll be out in about a week. This is the last of the poached egg plants. I've let the flowers go to seed. The bees really love them, but then I've just scattered the seeds around the garden, and this is where they'll grow. They'll start to germinate in the next few days, and there I have next year's crop already done. The garden looks a bit bare, but there'll be more flowers taking the place when they come out. Again, we've got purple Loosestrife and Hemp Agrame. Again, this will mature in a few weeks' time, and it'll be full of flowers, again attracting many bees and butterflies. This is a small Alpine Bed I built last year, just as a bit of a novelty, a bit of an experiment, and it's full of limestone chippings and a bit of grit and some tufa, and it's surprising how the alpine plants really love it here. It's a bit of a novelty, but it's quite a bonny little area, and again it attracts bees and insects. What I like about the nature of our garden is it's not regimental planting. The plants just grow where they want, and it becomes natural. It balances itself out to a very pleasing tapestry to our eyes. This wildflower, the sweet cicely, is finished now, but I'll leave the seed pods on and they'll drop down, and then in another couple of years we'll have more sweet cicely around the garden. If you rub these leaves here and the seed pods, it smells strongly of aniseed, a really popular plant. Not absolutely sure about the Clematis growing on my divide in the garden. It's pleasing to the eye, but whether it does a right lot of good for the insects, I'm not absolutely sure. You can't have a garden without buddleia, and in our garden I've got about 3. In another 2 or 3 weeks, when the flowers are opening, we'll get red admiral butterflies, tortoise shell and peacock. I haven't seen any commas up here in the north of England up here. They're more in the valleys to the west. So there might be commas this year, I don't know. There's always a chance. But we keep looking. If you plant your garden, the insects will come. So that's a quick tour of our garden at the end of June. I know it isn't a professionally made film because I've just talked my way around the garden, but hopefully all you up and budding gardeners and wildlife gardeners will get some inspiration out of this film. Wildlife gardening gives me so much pleasure. It's an absolute essential now to give you a well-being and all that. Get outside in your garden. If you don't have to walk into the countryside, bring the countryside into your garden. It's well worth it. I shall be publishing another film probably in the middle or late July when all the butterflies I hope are about and the dragonflies are hoping laying their eggs. Now remember, we live in Lancashire. We're 800 foot up on a west facing slope, so it's not always sunny, but that's why we have a lush garden, because we have a fairly high rainfall. Well, cheerio for now, and I'll see you perhaps in another few weeks.